All right, so I'm going to do my best to monitor the comments as we go along, but if you don't see it pop on the screen, it's because I can't do more than one thing at one time. I gotta introduce Jeremy here. All right, so Jeremy Horn is the founder of Elite Performance, a mixed martial arts training organization based in Salt Lake City, Utah. He's been an active competitor in MMA for over 30 years and has fought in over 180 fights during that career. Jeremy has fought in almost every fighting organization in the world and has also trained 6 UFC world champions. And I forgot to add in here who all: Forrest Griffen, can't remember the other guy, Frank Shamrock, I think maybe. We'll ask Jeremy whenever he gets on here. But Jeremy was also the former IFC, which is International Fighting Championships middleweight champion, and the King of the Cage lightweight champion. So we're going to ask him what all of these things mean and more. Let's welcome Jeremy onto the show. Hey, Jeremy.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
You bet. So could you decipher for us? Let's just start with the real basic stuff. Could you decipher for us all the acronyms? There's IFC, UFC, blah, blah, blah.
Sure. So the easiest way that I would explain it would be just similar to like the difference between USPSA and IDPA. Like they're both shooting sports. They're in the same sport. They have slightly different rules. They're different leagues. Some people can, some people shoot back and forth. You can be a USPSA grandmaster and still be nothing in IDPA if you never compete there. So all the different organizations have their own contender rankings, champions, and I fought for most of them. So.
Okay, now explain all the chaos in the background, because people are going to think you have that you have a bunch of kids or something.
Well,
so
I sort of do. I'm here at my gym right now in my office, and practice is going on right now. The kids are right outside the door, so you'll hear the occasional wild screaming banshee running past. So, and my dog is here, so she may freak out and start barking too at some point.
Yeah, mine too. Mine's the same way. Well, that's real life, right?
Yes.
So tell us about your beginnings. When did you start fighting? How did you get involved in it, etc.?
Okay, so I started training in martial arts when I was 12. My older brother was doing it, so I just followed along with what he did. And this was when was this? It was about 1987, I think, 87 or 88, right around there. So I'm really old. And so I just got hooked from day one. As soon as I found it, I fell in love with it and never looked back. So I trained constantly. And then when I was about 19 or 20, the UFC kind of rolled around, and it was kind of the new hot crazy thing. I don't know if you were familiar with it back then, but it was new. Nobody had ever seen it before. It was basically no rules fighting, and it was all the craze in the martial arts world. They would take different martial arts styles and let them all compete together. So, can a boxer beat a wrestler? Can a karate guy beat a taekwondo guy? And so they all just started going into the ring and beating the hell out of each other. And I saw it and fell in love, and so decided to jump in and try my hand at it. Turned out I was decent at it, and the rest is history. I just kept fighting and kept training, and fast forward 25 years, here we are.
Now, what were the names that I missed? I know there was, you gave me a list and I forgot to put it in my notes. Tell me who you fought against.
Well, so if you're familiar with
some of the
sport,
bigger names,
I've been fighting for, like I said, almost 25 years. And so I've fought almost everybody that you've ever heard of in the sport. So I fought Frank Shamrock for the title in the UFC. I fought Dan Severn. Those were both UFC champions. I fought Anderson Silva. He was UFC champion. I fought Chael Sonnen 3 times. I fought Forrest Griffen. I fought Randy Couture. A bunch of big names. I fought pretty much everybody.
That's insane. So, but there's got to be a reason. Isn't it true that most fighters have a 7 to 10 year career at most?
Yeah, that's pretty common. I don't know. I'm a bit of an anomaly. I think I've always tried to fight and win and get in and out of there as fast as I can without getting hurt, so I can fight again soon. But yeah, I don't know. I have kind of a knack for not getting hurt. I've never had a broken bone, never been cut, never been hurt in a fight. So
that
definitely been an anomaly. But really, the training is where a lot of guys get hurt and get banged up. It's hard on your body.
Yeah, and I saw a video on your YouTube channel where you were talking about, and that's part of the title of this too, is training smarter versus harder. And we're going to get into that a little bit later because obviously not just a believer, but it works
Yes,
if
yes,
you're smart in how you train. And I think that could be applied to the shooting world as well. So I want to get into that. Are there, so for those that don't know you, they only know you as a fighter, you're also a shooter and pretty decent shooter too, right?
I'm okay. Yeah, I've been competing. I've been shooting for a long time, but I didn't really find the competitive side of things till about maybe 2 years ago. So I dove right in. Like as my fighting career kind of started going, sliding into retirement a little bit, I had to do something competitive. So shooting became
Yeah.
my new addiction. So there's
Yeah.
there's a really big community here in Salt Lake City, and there's a match every single weekend. So for about the past 2 years, I've shot a match every weekend.
So are there things that overlap between shooting and fighting, or are there things you learned in fighting that help you in shooting?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of overlap. Obviously, just adherence to good technique. A lot of times, more effort does not equal more success. That kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
think about running into a position to shoot. Right, you got to learn how to decelerate early and get into that position smooth, rather than running it at a sprint and then tripping over yourself getting in there. So, just understanding how much energy to put into things and focusing on good technique above all else is pretty universal in both worlds.
So what is it about fighting that's so addictive? Like I was talking to you earlier, and I don't know that I would get, you got to be like, you got to get used to being in some kind of pain or getting beat up. Like how is that addictive? I don't understand. Help me
Well,
out here.
so here's the thing. That's what a lot of people ask. I don't want to get hurt. I do everything I can to not get hurt. I don't want to feel any pain, but I am willing to risk feeling some pain in order to inflict some pain on somebody else.
Oh,
So
okay.
I certainly love the competitive nature of it. Obviously, it's fun to go in there and compete and win. But honestly, I kind of like hurting people. But I'm not I'm not a bully. I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to pick a fight with somebody that doesn't want to fight and beat him up. That's not cool. But if somebody's willing to step into the ring with me and we're going to try to hurt each other, then I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, you said, I told you earlier, I'm like, man, you're really nice for being like somebody that is like this level of a competitor and fighter. Like you said something about it almost being an alter ego or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty mild mannered. I'm actually pretty shy. I don't really like. Well, it's a blessing and a curse. I don't really like being famous. I would rather people not know me. I'd rather be
Oh,
anonymous because I don't like a lot of the attention. But without that attention, I wouldn't have been fortunate enough to live the life that I have. I've gotten to live my whole life pretty much on my own schedule and on my own terms. And fighting as a career has taken me all over the world. But yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty mild mannered. I'm pretty laid back. I don't have a whole lot of anger. I don't really have any anger. Like I don't have to be angry to hurt somebody. I like doing it. So
that just must be a preconceived notion that people have about fighters or something.
yeah,
Like
that
they
and
all have chips on their shoulders. They're all trying to prove something or whatever.
and there are certainly some that are like that, but that wasn't the case for me. I enjoy doing it.
Hmm. Well, and you're good at it. You've learned how to be good at it over the long term, and I think that's one of the uh, rare things that you can offer to our audience that others couldn't. So we're gonna get into that, but there are some. So I'm so excited because I'm learning how to share my screen on here. There are some clips of his Forrest Griffen fight that, and I'm not a hardcore like fighting fan, but I do appreciate a good fight. And when I saw this fight, it was the best fight I've ever seen. Not that I've seen a lot, but even to somebody like me who doesn't know everything about it, anybody can watch this and get excited about it. It's just insanely good fighting. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take you through the beginning of round two for me to watch some of the punches you threw and just how quick you were. I want to show them that. And then I'm going to go a little bit further into the round and I won't spoil it for everybody about what happens. I'm just going to let you watch. But, and if there's anything you want to add or say during this, feel free to. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the audio or not. But anyway, it won't matter because it'll be good with or without it. So I'm going to cue this up. He's smiling because he knows. So this is the beginning of round 2 with Forrest Griffen, and we'll just play this for here to just a little bit.
I don't know. Man,
it's a close first round.
Bang, bang.
Oh, how about that? Look at Horn.
The sweat is
Dear God, look at that left hand.
Showing the stand-up we talked about. Now Griffen says, all right, I'm going to charge you a little bit.
That's right. The counter punching by Horn right now.
Horn is landing some shots.
Beautiful.
Tell you
It helps that the commentators are my friends, so they're pretty kind to me.
Yeah, he ain't backing down at all. He ain't backing down at all.
This is the difference between the 2 rounds. We saw Forrest Griffen taking it to him early, and Jeremy Horn says, no more of that.
That was actually kind of funny. He was actually talking to the referee right there.
Great shots in that.
Oh, he was?
Moments here in the second round.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that when we're done here. It was funny.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, that was mostly what I wanted to show you on that. And then, so what did you want to say about that portion?
Well, so if you rewind it a little bit, you can see him looking up and kind of talking to the referee, and you can't really hear it here. But when I take him down, he screams. He goes, "Ah, fuck!" And the referee's like, "What? What?" He thought I hurt him or something. And the referee's like, "Are you okay?" And I look up at the referee and I go, "Yeah, he's just mad because I took him down." And Forrest is
you
like,
said that?
"Yeah." Like we're talking to the referee. And Forrest is like, "Yeah, you're right."
Yeah, you're right. He says that.
Yeah, because he just, he's frustrated because that was a good takedown. I got a hold of him, he didn't expect it, and it was kind of funny. It's like when you at a higher level, and I've always been fairly comfortable with this, is like you can kind of detach yourself from what's going on, and you can hold a conversation. You can focus on 2 things at once.
You can.
I can. At least when I'm fighting, I can't when I'm shooting. When I'm trying to run a stage, man, I'm all in. Or if somebody talks to me, I lose it. But yeah, when I was fighting, I always was able to stay pretty calm and be able to focus on things around me. Like I've had conversations with people outside of the cage while I'm fighting. So
wow, I did notice that about you. An incredibly calm demeanor. That was one of the questions I'm going to get to later. But your composure is insane in these fights, and by this time, you had been fighting for probably a decade. By then, yeah. So you had some major experience.
Doing it for a while, yeah.
Right. So that's probably part of it too. Let's get to the even better part of this, if I can remember. Let's see. I put in my notes where it is. It's 9:45. Let me go to that section. Take the mute off because listening to the comments is even more fun.
I mean, both these guys know.
Well, I tell you what, Ron, that's what the respect of the competitors in this sport. And Chance will be the first one to tell you, hey man, when you're in there, it's nonstop hardcore. When we're done, we're going to the bar together.
We started with 8, we're down to 3, and soon we'll be down to 2. Forrest Griffen in the guard. And we're going to stand them up. How about Michael Stock says, you know what? You guys are working hard, but let's see you stand up anyway.
Oh my gosh. It gets better, guys. Just hang on.
It's over. Jeremy Horn with a kick. Knocks out Forrest Griffen.
Dear God.
They do a slow-mo replay here, so we're going to hang on just a second and watch it a little bit longer.
Just a little bit. Jens Pulver standing up right now. He wants to get over.
The crowd is in a frenzy. The crowd is in a frenzy.
Awesome
that
fight.
Was unreal. Look at
Chance is
Griffen.
in a frenzy. Give him a second.
Chance don't even have his headset up.
I know, man.
He's standing on his chair. He was almost 6 feet tall. Dear God.
Watch this replay. It's going to come up here.
Let's show you the finish. I mean, how about this? They stand up and Jeremy's like, I got something for you. Surprise.
Oh.
Surprise. How do you like that?
Oh,
And
good
just
night,
finish
ladies
him.
and
Oh,
gentlemen.
boy.
Yeah, beautiful stoppage. Beautiful stoppage.
That was
Because
a
I'll tell
fun
you
one.
what, Griffen was going to get hurt. Griffen was going to get hurt.
That was an amazing.
Look at that.
That was a
Unreal.
fight, man. Jeremy Horn
Unreal.
just shows the experience,
Beautiful.
shows the stand-up
Look at
that
him.
he's been working hard on, man.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Well, okay, let's we're obviously done with that. Stop. Okay. Stop sharing. Anyway, okay. So tell me about that moment, because what I observed, Jeremy, was you guys were pulled apart and you both had to stand up, and it almost looked like whenever you came back to the fight, you had a poker face almost. Like
Yeah.
you almost didn't want him to know what you were getting ready to do. Like he had no idea.
Yeah. Well, so if you watch the whole fight, that was actually the first kick I had thrown in the whole fight.
Yeah.
Well, it was all grappling and punching until that point. And as we stood up, I thought, well, I haven't thrown a kick yet. Maybe he won't see it coming. And obviously he
did
didn't.
not see it coming.
So but yeah, I was just kind of like, yeah, let's throw this up there and see how that goes.
That was awesome. I loved it, because here's why. Because we were talking earlier and I said, you know what it feels like to me? It feels like the best fighters are the best thinkers. Like this is a thinking man's game. Yes, it's absolutely physical and there's technique involved and everything else, but it totally is a thinking man's game. And what it seemed like what you were doing, and we have more clips coming up here in a little bit, is looking for your opportunity.
Yeah, very, very much so. That's one thing that it's a big misconception. It's fading away a little bit as the sport becomes more popular. But early on, everybody thought that MMA fighters were just, cavemen that were in there trying to kill each other, and obviously some were. But for the most part, the majority of people that fight in MMA are generally pretty bright. They're
well, you have to be so you don't get hurt.
Yeah,
right.
There's you'll have your occasional guy that's just a freak athlete that is just powerful and athletic and strong. But most of the time, the best fighters are smart, or at least what they call a fight IQ. They may not be real book smart, but their strategy and their thought process and their composure, as far as it pertains to a fight, at least, is usually pretty high.
So then what kind of, because I am relating all of this to shooting, mostly competitive shooting.
Sure.
What is the mental game behind this? Like what is your mental process going into a fight? What does that look like? I mean, I know there's probably a warming up process of some kind physically, but I'm more interested in the mental aspect of it.
Well, so it is very similar. Obviously, you have your training, which needs to be polishing all the physical skills so that when it's required, you can do it. So you spend a lot of time on a fast draw, fast transition, sight acquisition, reloads, all that kind of stuff. And you learn how to do that like at a subconscious level, so you don't have to think about doing it. When it's time to be done, your body does it. So then when you go to a match and you can look at a stage, you can break apart the stage and see how you want to run that stage. And that your body is going to do the right things. Like, here's the start position. The first position I'm going to shoot from is, 10 feet to my right around a barricade or something. And how to run over there properly. You're not going to sprint and fall out of bounds and lose your position. You're going to decelerate properly because you've trained all of those skills before. So then when it comes time to shoot the match, you don't have to tell yourself, hey, start decelerating 3 steps early so that I can be in position with the gun, because you've already trained all of that stuff. So then when it's time to break down the stage, you're just go here, shoot these, go here, shoot these, reload as I move over here, shoot these, you can walk through it in more simple terms because you've already trained all of the individual skills. And that's how fighting always was for me. I always would look at every fight, every position. I wanted to break apart that position and try to figure out what is the best way to handle this. If he's going to do this, these are my options. This is my best option. This maybe is the one that's easiest. This is the one he's going to expect the least. And then when it comes time to fight, all I have to do is just basically go in there and let my body go on autopilot and do what it wants to do because I've already trained all of the skills.
That's what I was going to ask you, was what percentage of a fight do you feel like is subconscious competence and what percentage is conscious, like strategic thought while you're doing it? Like literally, if you're able to have a conversation with the ref or people outside the ring while you're fighting, you're obviously not needing to give too much conscious skill, cognitive skill to it.
Well, so there's different portions of a fight. Obviously, in an MMA fight, when you're standing up and you're throwing punches and stuff, you got to be a little more dialed in and focused there.
Well, sure, yeah.
You can't really split your attention there because you're your reflexes and things are a lot, you got to be sharp on the ball. But then when you're on the ground, everything slows down a little bit. And so you have a little more bandwidth to think and expand your focus a little bit more and start opening up and loosening up a little bit. And that's
So
really
when
what I
you're-
always excelled was on the ground more than anything.
So when you're standing up, are you being more reactive, so to speak? Then when you're on the ground, you have time to think and time to recoup a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Or is that just as taxing physically being on the ground?
When you get better, it does tend to be a little more time to relax and recuperate and let your body recharge a little bit. But yeah, your reflexes and reaction time are way more important on your feet.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this is so fascinating because there's a lot of correlations actually between, and it's just being a high performer in general, I think, is what this is really about. And so tell me about the role of mental toughness and what that plays in training, in fighting, and what advice would you give to people to help develop that?
Well, I think it really comes down to, again, just the deeper your understanding is of what you're doing, then the more you can kind of separate your emotions from your brain. So, for example, if somebody is gonna, I don't know, if they're gonna twist my finger and they're gonna break my finger, it hurts pretty bad, but I need to be, that's illegal in that. You're not allowed to do that kind of thing. But just as an example, I could step back from that and go, okay, you're going to break my finger and that's going to hurt really bad. But how much is it really going to affect my ability to fight? Breaking my finger off is not that big a deal. It's going to hurt real bad. So I have to just be able to endure that pain so that I can continue to do whatever it is I need to do. It's like, I'm sure you've heard stories of people in the military and law enforcement getting shot, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people get shot in the hand and it's game over for them because they give up and quit. Mm-hmm. Other people get shot really, really badly and they just refuse to quit. Mm-hmm. And they just mentally fight through that and just do what needs to be done, and as we all know, your body is way more resilient than you think it is. So if your brain doesn't give up, if your mind doesn't quit, your body will follow along much easier. And that's really all it is. I look at every position, I look at every fight. There was an old movie I can't remember the name of it, but it had a perfect quote. It said, are you hurt or are you injured? That hurts. Does it stop the functioning of my body? No. Well, then ignore it. It doesn't matter, and there's some stuff that doesn't really hurt, but is going to affect the functioning of your body. If you're going to break my elbow, I can't fight anymore, even if it may not hurt that bad. It does. But, theoretically,
I bet it does.
But yeah, if theoretically, if it doesn't hurt, you could ignore it, but that doesn't do me any good because I still can't fight if my arm is broken.
Right.
So.
Well, then the other thing I wanted to ask you too is I was watching another fight of yours and I didn't watch it all the way through, but it seemed as though you were maybe not winning.
I've had a few of those.
Yeah, it seemed as though you were in survival mode. And so my question to you is, when you're in survival mode and your back's against the wall and things aren't going good, how do you get through that mentally, not just to endure that, but to think your way through that, to stay calm and try to stay strategic and not panic? And then not only that, but then to get back up on top again, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
What does that process look like?
The biggest thing for me is trying to stay focused on the right things to do and trying not to focus on the part of it where I'm getting beat up and it hurts and I'd rather be somewhere else right now. But that's really what it boils down to is like in any given scenario, I have a handful of options and it's up to me to choose the best option, the most beneficial option that's going to, tip the fight in my favor as much as I can. And if I can't access that option because my opponent is stopping me, then I'm just going to pick the best option I have, and just keep working through there. One of the best analogies for MMA or jiu-jitsu is they call it human chess. Are you familiar with chess? Do you play it all?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
Well, so basically what it boils down to is there are specific rules that the pieces have to move in. And so with that understanding, there are only there's a finite number of moves from any given position on the board.
Yeah.
And the grandmasters at chess, they know all of the moves.
Mm-hmm.
My first move is this. I know all of your responses as well because I know the game, right? So I move here, and these are your 10 options. Of those 10 options, 3 of them lead to certain defeat, 4 of them are kind of neutral, and 3 of them are pretty good. So you're going to pick the best one you can. And now this position, my next move is this, and these are, so it really, it's more about understanding the game.
That when you're in survival mode, though, Jeremy.
Right, but I'm still looking at the board, and I'm still trying to make the best moves I can, given what's available to me. And that's what I'm saying. You got to be able to step back and remove your emotions from it to a certain degree.
That's what I was just getting ready to say.
Your emotions are not affecting the choices you make, because your emotions are always like, I want to go run and hide in the corner where he's not hitting me anymore. But that's not the best choice. That doesn't lead me to a win. Or some people just get really angry. They just get so mad, and then that leads to you not being able to think through it either, right? Correct. Yes. Yeah. Generally, getting angry, getting emotional in general is pretty bad. But getting angry is pretty bad. Some people, it fuels them well, but that's rare. Most people fight very poorly when they're angry.
This is really interesting stuff. I like it. I have so many questions too. Okay, let's go back into. We're gonna get into your career and training smart versus hard. We've got a little bit of time here, but guys, if you have questions for Jeremy, be putting those in the comments, because this is gonna go by quickly. Trust me, this is how all these good interviews go. And before I know it, it's gonna be over, and I'm gonna go, oh. So make sure you're putting those questions in the comments while you think of them. As soon as they pop in your brain, just put them in there. We'll gather them at the end. So there's a highlight reel online too of some of your fights. And there's this particular part that I want to show. If there's anything else while this is playing that you want to comment on, feel free to, but I'm just going to run this through here. And there's no sound on this one. But some of these moves, man, holy cow. This one. So that can't be something you've planned out. That is just, you saw an opportunity and you took it right now. You had to think quickly and do that.
A little of both. You train all of these moves, and some of them are, higher percentage than others, and some are pretty low percentage, but you train all of them to a certain extent. And so when the opportunity presents itself, if your reflexes and your thinking process is sharp enough, then you're gonna go after it.
Oh, this looks like it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? Is that an arm bar? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, I was his
I knew one move.
So I've got his right arm, and I stretch it out, and then I get my legs in front of his face and hold his arms immobile so that then I can straighten out his right arm.
And that's it on that one. Well, there was more highlights, but I didn't want to just play highlights the whole interview. Part of me kind of wanted to, but okay. All right. So, and that was when I was going to talk about the thinking man's game, because I could tell in that moment you saw that opportunity and took it, and I would not have that ability, but I guess if I trained enough for it, I might. I don't know.
That's what it boils down to. People look at shooting competitions and they say the same thing. How can you do that? How can you take that, that 20-yard headshot? How can you because I practiced that a lot, and I put a lot of time into going as fast as I can and then decelerating and focusing enough to get the shot off. And you focus on good trigger manipulation. You focus on a good grip. You build all that into the background where your body just does it naturally. And then you just focus on going as fast as you can.
And that's the whole thing about when people say, well, you make it look easy. Well, no, I mean, it's literally years of training to make it look easy, right?
Yep.
So a 3-decade-long career. Yeah, you've managed to basically beat the odds. You've not been hurt. I mean, do you knock on wood every time you say that?
I should have, but I think nobody ever wants to retire, right? No fighter wants to quit. You just gradually fight less and less often until you die between two of your fights. So my last fight was about 2 years ago, and I am just now. I just finished. I had my knee, my meniscus needed to get cleaned up, so I had my first ever surgery in my life last Tuesday. So I'm
Last
recovering
Tuesday.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, like I said, I've had a really fortunate career. I've never been hurt, never been doing anything. So, but now that I think I'm probably done, I don't need to knock on wood anymore, because if I get hurt, I'm not fighting anymore.
So then talk to us about that then. You had a video on YouTube. Guys, go to his YouTube channel. That all of his social media stuff's running across the bottom right now, as well as his website, about training smarter versus harder. What can you tell people about that? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I just think that, I mean, it's kind of like, again, kind of just to compare it to the shooting world. Like, a lot of people want to go to the range and they want to just burn thousands of rounds of ammo and do nothing useful. You know, and the people that are getting good are doing lots of dry fire and they're working on specific skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen videos where Ben Steger is doing drills where he will just take a couple of shots, step across a stick, and take a couple more shots, and then step across a stick. You know, he's just working movement and transitions, and you know, you break it down into very, very simple little bits, and then when it comes time to perform, all those little bits come together. But it's the same thing. I've always thought that, you know, focusing on the individual techniques, focusing on as clean and polished of technique as you can is the way to get it done. You don't have to train super hard. You know, people want to come to the gym and they want to just beat the hell out of each other all day long. And really, I'd rather go light and soft and not necessarily slow, but, you know, I want to do the dry fire version of training, right? I want to work through the technique. I want to do it at a fairly slow, not competitive level until my body understands the movement enough that then we can start picking the pace up a little bit and going a little faster and a little harder. But even then, I don't want to go super hard. Like, some people like to train at about 90% of what a fight is. You know, that's not healthy. You're gonna get brain damage doing that. That doesn't help.
That's funny that you said that, because we had somebody on recently that was talking about training. If you train at 100%, then when you go into competition, you can consistently compete at your 90% and be consistent, which is key in competitive shooting. So it sounds like your theory behind that is totally different, at least for fighting. And I think that's,
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, basically, like, so let me think how I can explain this. So that's true. So I used to have some guys I shoot with, and we train together, and we would do like cadence drills, right? So I would try to explain it to people like this: if you can shoot under control at, you know, 20 splits, but you're doing it and you're seeing the dot and you're putting the shots where you want them at 20 splits, you're moving pretty good. It doesn't matter if you can shoot 15 splits. If you can control it at 20, that's probably fast enough. And it's the same kind of thing. I tell people, you know, when we're working on that, it's kind of like the difference between if you are running at top speed, you're just sprinting down the track at top speed, or you remember when you were a little kid and you go running down a hill. Well, you're on the edge of losing it and just eating shit, but you're maybe going faster than you are at a full sprint, right? But you're not in control, or you're barely in control, right? I would rather be able to, I'd rather back off a little bit and go a little bit slower, but in 100% control.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so, and in the shooting world, that's what they're looking at. If you can control, you know, if you can run at 90% speed in 100% control, where 100% speed is maybe on the verge out of control, then it's not worth it. It's worth it to slow down.
That's what they're talking about then, isn't it? Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
And so it's kind of the same with fighting, except for the fact that it just takes a horrible toll on your body. The same thing does apply in fighting, but it's not a worthwhile trade to me. You know, if you come into the gym and every single day that you train, it's basically a full-on fight with your friends. You know, you're trying to knock each other unconscious. You're going to develop a level of composure at that level of competition, right? So then when you go into a fight, it's no different than your training, because you've already dealt with that level of adversity, but it's just not healthy. You can't.
It's not healthy.
It's not healthy. So same thing. I would rather work at a lower percentage with less impact to my body, And then I can create that anxiety. I can kind of fill the gap myself with my own, just by reacting properly to the way I should. You know, if I'm sparring with somebody and he punches me in the face and he's not hitting me hard, I could just ignore it. But if I want to train properly, I need to treat that punch as if it would hurt me. I need to react properly. I need to treat it, I need to give it proper credit. And if I do that and my partner does that as well, then we can get a really good, we can train really well and not really be getting hurt and getting beat up. But it requires it requires the same focus from both sides.
And so when you talk about, some people say that fear and stress are a negative thing. I would argue that in competition or in high performance, that stress is actually needed and can be used. Maybe even fear could be used to your advantage. What is your experience with that? And don't you think there's a level of stress needed because what you're doing is really high risk, just like shooting? So you need to be, like you say, on point. There's a level of stress involved with that.
Sure.
But then is there a tipping point on that?
I think there absolutely is. I think, a little bit of stress and maybe even a little bit of fear in the fight can help you. But yes, there is certainly, excuse me, there is certainly a point where you go over that edge, like tension in a draw, right? I mean, nobody says if you want to draw fast, you got to start by flexing every muscle in your body and hope that speeds you up, right? That doesn't help, right? So, and stress and fear do that to you. So there is a certain level where they're going to push you to excel, but then there is a tipping point where they're going to start becoming negative and you're going to start reacting poorly to them.
And do you have any approaches or strategies to controlling those? It seems like you just kind of naturally are chill, which is really weird to me. But for those of us that aren't, any advice?
I am a bit of an anomaly. I've always been this way, and fighting has never really raised my heart rate much. I'm pretty calm. I get performance anxiety because I want to perform well. But as far as being scared and it's just that never was there. I'm kind of weird. But when I try to help other people with that, what I think is the most useful is to make sure that they are training at a level that is, let me think what's the right word for it. I want it to be, the challenge is low enough that it's not eliciting fear and stress, right? So if I'm, if we're training together and I'm going to teach you how to slip a punch, right? I can say, look, I'm going to punch you in the face as hard as I can. You better move out of the way because if I hit you, I'm going to break your nose. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go, right? You're going to be terrified. But if I start really slowly and I go, okay, I'm going to extend my arm and I'm going to tap you on the forehead and I want you to try to move. And if you don't move, I just tap you on the forehead. Then you can try to move properly without the fear of failure, because you're not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And then as you get better with that, I start going a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker. And then maybe I make a closed fist and I put on a glove and I tap you on the forehead. And as soon as you start reaching that point where you're starting to close your eyes, you're starting to flinch, you're starting to overreact. Obviously, fear is getting too much, so we back off. And that's what I want all the guys at the gym to do too. I want them all to push hard up until the point where they find themselves starting to make mistakes, starting to flinch, starting to react poorly to things. That's when they're going too hard, and they need to dial it back just a little bit and then stay right there.
So it's an incremental exposure, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like stress inoculation.
Right. Yeah, same thing.
Yep.
Man, there's a lot of overlap. That's crazy.
I train a group of cops locally here. They come and train with us. I'm part of their DT program. And one of them is a real high-level competitive shooter here. And he and I talk about it all the time, how much overlap there is. Like, fighting is fighting. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're, if I'm fighting with my hands or he's, on the job fighting, he's part of the SWAT team, he's fighting with a gun, fighting is fighting. The mentality overlaps a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is really valuable stuff that you're giving our audience. So I really appreciate it. I've got a few more questions. And then if you guys have any questions for Jeremy, put those in the comments. I don't see any yet. This is kind of a quiet audience tonight. And it's funny because I've had past guests before that I was really, really excited about. And I thought people would have just so many questions, but I don't know if they just get like so captivated or something that they just, I don't know what it is. Sometimes they're quiet and then sometimes they banter the entire broadcast. So don't know what it is, but so you talked about
giant head.
I doubt it. No. I'm going to talk about you as a coach here in just a second, but I'm curious to know, were there coaches of yours, people that had mentored you or coached you along your journey, that really had a huge impact on you? What happened with that? What was your relationship with them, and what did they teach you?
Yeah, I've had a couple of different coaches. Certainly people that I've learned from a lot throughout my journey as a fighter. But my first couple of coaches, a guy named Dave Jobin, who's was very, very big in my life. He helped me a lot when I first got started training. And then Pat Miletich was another one. I moved to Iowa and trained with him when I first started fighting, and he was a big influence as well. But I've learned a lot from a lot of different people. John Lewis was another guy that taught me a lot. He came to Omaha and did a seminar when I was still very, very new to the sport, and showed me a lot of cool things. And he kind of opened the door to me to start exploring things on my own a little bit. But yeah, there's been a lot of people that have kind of, I don't even know if they would know they did it, but I saw them do something. I was like, oh, I'm going to figure out how to do that. And I just would keep studying until I could figure it out.
And did you have like a dedicated mentor or coach like along your path, maybe early on or when you were having struggles?
No, not
training?
really. My first coach, my martial arts instructor back then was a guy named Dave Job, and he's the one I trained with when I started when I was 12, and I trained with him until I was 19 or 20. He actually came with me to my first fight. And then not long after that, I ended up moving to Iowa. So I was with him for like 6 or 7 years. And he helped quite a bit. And then when I moved to Iowa, I was training with Pat Miletich, and he was the kind of the next in line that they kind of gave me some guidance and kind of gave me some focus as to what it is I wanted to do.
Do you think that there are some people that are just more like wired, whether it's a shooting or hand to hand, doesn't matter. They're just more wired to be a fighter than other people? Or do you think that there are some people, like you say you're shy, which to me just sounds so crazy. It sounds like it's hard for me to wrap my brain around that, and that could be like, I would say that's a superpower, because you mean like a nice shy guy, and then if somebody didn't know you and then you had to defend yourself, man, that'd be a bad day for that guy.
Yeah, I mean, luckily that doesn't happen because I don't go out in public very often. I'm a hermit too.
Are you?
Yeah, I just hide at home and play video games, hang out with my dog, dry fire. I don't do much else.
Yeah, you said that you're lucky that you've just kind of been able to live the life that you wanted to live. And I said, I don't think that's luck. I think that you've built that. And I don't know if you've meant to, but you've built that yourself. So you should take a little bit of credit for that.
Well, I do. I mean, I certainly worked hard throughout my career, but I don't know. I mean, there's a difference between working hard at something that you love to do and working hard at a job that you hate. I mean, it's
right.
They say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. So, yeah. I mean, I went to the gym every day and I trained hard, but it was just me going to the gym and hanging out with my buddies. I mean, that's like, is it, let's say you're a paid shooter. Is it really work to go to the range and shoot 1,000 rounds a day? Like, no, not really, right. But that's work.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I just live my life playing with my friends all day, every day. And then every now and then go beat somebody up and they pay me for it. So
that's awesome. That's a great life to live.
Very much so. I'm very, very happy.
So we do have a few questions. I want to get to, though, I want to plug your gym just a little bit. And I don't know if you're taking new clients or anything, but you're in Salt Lake City and you teach. Tell us about your place there in Salt Lake.
Well, so, I've been in martial arts my entire life. And so that was, I mean, I knew from an early age that I was going to do something in martial arts eventually. And so obviously it was fighting for a long time, but I also found out that I love to teach. So, and I'm kind of a natural teacher. I kind of can't help it when I see people that are doing something that needs some correction, I will try to help them. And so luckily most people in the gym, obviously they come to me, But I teach people how to shoot as well, some local people and stuff like that. But I've always wanted to do it. I've always wanted to help people. So it was kind of a natural segue from student to fighter to coach.
Yeah, it seems like you do have a heart for that. That's pretty cool. Well, we do have a few questions. Oh, here's another one. And yeah, bear with me, guys, because I'm running the show by myself tonight. So it probably isn't quite so streamlined as usual. I am going to give a shameless plug here before we get into the Q&A. We do have a few questions, so I'm excited to give those to Jeremy. But if you would please check out, and here I have to find it, and it's just not normally what I do. Go to defenders-live.com to learn about all things Defenders Live. Past guests, past episodes are on there. You can go to our partners page and help out Defenders Live. Not only will you help Defenders Live, but you'll help out the companies that are partnered with Defenders Live. Haven Defense Company is one of those companies, and they are on the show tonight that I did shout out. So really would appreciate you going and checking that out. And also, if you want updates on upcoming guests as well, you can sign up for our email list at defenders-live.com. So there's my shameless plug for the night. All right, let's see who we have here for questions. So we'll just go with the first one. Doug wants to know, how deadly is Krav Maga?
Well, so that's a little bit of a sore subject. I personally don't think Krav Maga is very valuable. I think it's done a great job of marketing itself as a viable form of self-defense, but nothing I have ever seen in all of my years has ever led me to believe that Krav Maga is any better than just trying to run away. In fact, it's probably worse, because if you think to yourself that you are capable of defending yourself, then you're not going to be quite as cautious as you would be. If you know that you're 100%, a lamb to the slaughter, then you're not going to go anywhere near as dangerous as you would if you think, yeah, I can handle myself. I'm not too worried about it. I can take care of myself. So yeah, I think it might even be a detriment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, Carmine wants to know, should it be almost mandatory for people that carry to do a martial art? And if yes, what would you recommend?
Yes, I think it should. I think there's a lot of crossover as we've discussed. There's a lot of crossover in mentality and training theory and stuff between shooting and fighting. But, there's no one size fits all scenario for self-defense. I mean, obviously trying to avoid confrontation is the best way to go always. But if you are, let's say you carry a gun, for self-defense, I mean, not every scenario is escalates to the level required for a gun, and if you don't have any way to defend yourself, it's going to force you to escalate to that gun, because that's the only option you have, right? Whereas, I mean, I don't worry about getting mugged too often. Granted, I don't go anywhere anyway, but like, I'm not worried about getting mugged. I'm a big guy, and people generally leave me alone. But even if they do, like, I'm totally capable of handling myself just hand to hand. So the gun doesn't need to be an option. But if you don't know how to handle yourself, then the gun is your only option. You're going to go to it way sooner than maybe you would need to if you had some training other than that. The same thing applies, obviously. Being a good boxer or good fighter, that's not the end of the road either. Sometimes you do need to go to a gun, and I think everybody should carry and be well trained in both hand-to-hand and firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as which one, yeah, it would be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think. A mix of, obviously MMA has kind of become a style of its own, but really MMA is mixed martial arts. So it's, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some sort of grappling, some sort of striking. I favor a more boxing-oriented approach, punching and footwork and head movement as opposed to, too many kicks. But again, that's, some sort of competent striking, some sort of competent grappling, and some sort of, competent firearm skill.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Aaron wants to know, he says, Craig Douglas is big on using the Greco-Roman techniques in conjunction with defensive handgun skills. Do you have any specific techniques that you feel overlap well with defensive shooting?
Oh yeah, I know Craig Douglas. A lot of his stuff is spot on. I agree with everything he says pretty much. I've never heard him say anything that I would disagree with. Understanding, how to control somebody's body, how to control their limbs, particularly the upper body is what Greco-Roman really excels at. And so, yeah, being able to control somebody's hands if they've got a knife or a gun is definitely a useful skill. That's if you're hearing anything from Craig, it's gospel.
Clint wants to know, what are some good open hand skills to master for the regular everyday defender?
Well, I would say still, some sort of grappling. I always go back to that, but the truth of the matter is, if you are thinking from a purely self-defense scenario, like obviously I was a competitive fighter, so I needed to be as well-rounded as possible. But if you're looking from a purely self-defense scenario, unless that guy's within arm's reach of me, I can run away. I don't really need to know how to box unless I want to fight, right? And if I can't run away from you, then I'm going to grab you, and now we're wrestling, and I'm just going to pick you up and throw you on your head. I still don't need to know how to box. It doesn't hurt to be reasonably well-rounded at everything, but every fight that I've ever seen, they will grapple. People are going to hit each other, and when they're close enough, they're going to grab each other. So understanding how to do some wrestling, how to do some form of grappling, jiu-jitsu, sambo, judo, whatever, all of those will give you a big step in the right direction.
Okay. And then Heather's asking, is there a single fighting technique that best encompasses defensive skills for the average human?
I'm not quite sure what what angle she's getting at. A best defensive technique that encompasses defensive skills. I don't know, maybe have her reword that.
Single fighting technique. Heather, can you elaborate? That's the fun thing about it being live.
Yeah, just at a glance, I would say always just understanding how to grapple. That's one thing that a lot of people don't. The world's a nasty place, and there's a lot of bad people out there fighting, getting assaulted. Like this violence happens. That's why we all carry guns. That's why we all shoot. Violence happens. But what people don't understand is quite often that violence is like very close contact. So understanding how to grapple, how to wrestle, something along those lines is very, very useful.
Yeah, and I think too about retention too. Like I'm thinking if somebody's close to me, I've got pepper spray or a gun or whatever it is, the tool that I'm using. If I'm within arm's reach of that person, they can get whatever it is that I have, or get me, or get both. Yep. And yeah, that's a real thing. So there's definitely something to consider whenever we know that, not all, but many, when they're trying to take something from you, or they want you, they are going to get close to you. And so you must be able to handle that. So
that's another thing I think that a lot of people maybe don't quite understand, or they don't, the movies have kind of led us to believe that, you're going to hit the guy in the throat and he's going to gag and fall down and you're going to run away or whatever. But the truth of the matter is the more training you can get, the greater chance you have of success. But you have to temper what you think of as success. So if we're going into a competitive fight in a cage with a referee, then success is determined by who wins the fight, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're a 5 foot tall, 110-pound woman that gets jumped coming out of the supermarket late at night, then success means that you walk away from that encounter without dying. Right? You're going to get beat up. You're going to get your nose broken. You're going to get some things taken from you. But if you can walk away from that encounter and not be dead or not be hospitalized, then that's a win. Mm-hmm. You won that encounter. You don't need to immobilize your attacker and whatever. Like if you can just curl up in a ball and defend yourself well enough that he decides it's not worth his time anymore, then you won. Right. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They're like, well, I'm a little woman. I want to know how to. I want to know how to take down this 250-pound guy. Like, you're not gonna. But if he's trying to attack you and you can survive, we're going to call that a win.
Yeah.
It's not.
Heather just commented on what she was talking about.
Oh, perfect.
So
okay, yeah. So again, some form of grappling, I would say. I say grappling, but really they're all kind of the same. I mean, you know, men have been fighting each other since the dawn of time, and we still have 2 arms, 2 legs, and 1 neck. So it's kind of all the same. Grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, sambo, you know, any of the grappling styles I think would be a very good head start. Yeah, it's something along those lines. Another thing that I think is pretty important is do something that has a competitive element to it. Even if you don't want to compete, you don't have to compete. But like, you know, if I say to you, I've got a 0.2 draw, what are you going to say?
That's impossible.
No. 0.2, I can get out of the holster in 0.2. What are you going to say?
I don't know. I feel like this is a trick question.
It's not. You're going to say, okay, show me.
Oh,
Prove
yeah.
it. Show me.
Yeah.
And you're going to get the timer out, and my draw is going to be like 1.7. You'll be like, yeah, you lied. Right? But that's the point. So if anybody is going to make a claim about something they can do, there should be a competitive environment where they can prove it. Jiu-jitsu has competitions all over the place. If you want to see if your technique works, go to a match against somebody that's actively trying to stop you and see who can win. That will show you if your technique is you know, if the style that you're learning is useful. Yeah. And yes, there's rules. You know, there's always going to be some caveats. It's not 100%. But just like a match, right? If you say, you know, I can shoot XYZ, and then you watch me go to a match and I'm throwing misses all over the place, you're like, clearly that guy's talking shit. He's not as good as he thinks he is, right? So there has to be an element where you can prove it. If you're going to tell me you can do something, you better be willing to step up and prove it in some form of actual competition. So that's very important.
Well, and I think what you're saying is it should be tested.
Right.
Yeah. That's
tested with competition. And even, you know, just a timer is
under stress. Is that what you're saying? Under stress of some kind.
Stress is it's another level that is very useful. Definitely. Yeah. And there's always going to be some element of stress, right? I mean, if I say, you know, show me you can do this, and if you can, I'll give you $100. There's a little bit of stress there. You want that money. Right? So, but yeah, I mean, the level of stress is definitely useful. Definitely helpful. Yeah.
Well, we have made it to the hour mark and learned quite a bit from you tonight, Jeremy. Is there anything that you want to leave with the audience before we go here?
No, I mean, I just appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm always appreciative of all the people, you know, brothers and sisters in the shooting community that are always looking to push further and harder and make sure we're all getting better and getting home safe, you know, particularly the law enforcement and military. I'm a big supporter of both. And I know obviously I'm preaching to the choir here. We're all in the same family, but I just wish more people would tune into things like this and understand how difficult a job, you know, law enforcement is. So I know, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys all feel the same way, I imagine, but it's big. It's important for me.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time with us tonight and humoring me on all my questions. I got through most of them. So yeah, you've been very kind, and I appreciate that, and answering all of the audience's questions as well.
Anytime. I'd love to come back. I love talking to people. I love exposing new people to my life and my world and what I do. And
it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. So I might take you up on that. What do you guys think? Shout out in the comments if you want Jeremy back on. We'll do a part 2, Jeremy Horn. That might be in the works. We'll see. All right. Well, we are going to move on here, and I'm just going to tell you what to expect for next week. So we have a part 2 coming up. Funny enough, I mentioned part 2s, right? We have a part 2 coming up next week with Tim Herron. So I don't know if you guys saw Tim Herron. Gosh, I can't remember exactly when he was on a few months back with Tim Herron shooting. He's a USPSA Grandmaster shooter and a Masterclass IDPA shooter, and he's been instructing since 2015. He has a real heart for teaching, and he has a really brilliant mind as well. And so I love picking at his brain and asking him all kinds of questions. Very high energy guy too. So he's really fun to have on, and he did agree to come back and do a part 2 because last time he was on, we weren't able to get to quite everything. So be sure to tune in next week, May 10th, for part 2 with Tim Herron. That'll be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll see you then. Until then, take care.